happen in an incremental, rational way. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Susan, and as will be evident to all of you pretty quickly, this is a similar song sung in different keys with different verses. The premise of Disrupting Class is that disruptive innovation is massively intruding upon the conventional model of K-12, that it will be the majority of all secondary enrollments in fewer than 8 years, and that this is a good thing. It has its roots before, shall we say, the recent unpleasantness. Before any of us knew that there were such things as securitized debt obligations backed up by credit default swaps and sliced into mezzanine tranches to toxify the international banking system. I didn't know any of that stuff before. It's before we kind of officially declared the end of the era of American exceptionalism. We had a long run, half-century or so, in which we either beat or bought or bombed everybody in sight. We had a workforce almost perfectly aligned to the contours of what the economy was looking for, and we were very talented at exploiting several generations of cheap commodities, whether you're talking about steel or concrete or food or fuel. We were the best in the world at that, and we had a great ride. Now the question is, in context, can we do the value-added stuff? Can we raise a generation that's prepared to do what the American advantage is for the 21st century, or do we just encourage our kids to learn Mandarin? And the Chinese did indeed have a few bad centuries, but they are apparently back. A fast primer on what disruptive innovation is, so that's not a cryptic term. I'll do this as fast as I can. Two kinds of innovation out there. One we all recognize, sustaining or incremental innovation. It's the things get better. What products and services that you're familiar with, that you recurringly buy or use, they tend to be the dominant players in that particular industry, and they are very good at making that product or service a little better all the time. In fact, on a technology basis, most of those products and services get better than we can use. I don't drive my car 120 miles an hour, but it'll go that. Unless I've got a 12-year-old at the ready, I probably can't do everything that the DVR machine is capable of. I mean, the technology generally outraces the customer's ability to use it. And the players that continue along this innovation path get better and better, and they continue to dominate the industry. But from time to time, something comes along from the outside. Two quick examples. One from the era of the 80s when mini computers dominated it. You remember mini computers are about the size of this podium over here, but compared to mainframes that would fill this whole room, they were small, and it meant that engineers could have them in their departments as opposed to just having one per corporation. And most of these companies were in the Boston area. They were always written up as the best managed companies in the United States, if not the world, and within the space of about 2 years, they all evaporated. And just take one, DEC, Digital Equipment. They made $250,000 computers that they sold at 40% profit margins. Pretty good deal. They had visions of making even more expensive machines at even higher profit margins, and they had engineers who could look out the window and see that some people in their garages were making this thing called a PC. They were not ignorant of that, and they were not incapable of doing the same thing, but it did not fit their business model, which is the lesson in disruptive innovation. Every enterprise is driven by really only three things. Resources, got to have them. Cash, people, facilities, equipment. If you don't do that, you don't move. But processes, and that's those things that we do to be successful. If you start a company, you quit doing the things that don't work and you repeat the things that do work, and over time they become something we call the organizational culture. And it's the stuff we don't have to talk about because we can all assume. And that is both a platform for success, but it is also a prison whenever we start to be disrupted, because the way we do things keeps us from adapting to the threat that's disruptive on the outside. And that's exactly what happened to the mini computer industry. They couldn't see it coming. Why would they? shift over to $2,000 machines at 5 to 10% profit margins. It made no sense to their business model. They couldn't do it. And that's the third driver, and that's priorities. We value some things over others. One other quick example. Some of you in the room are old enough to remember when most electronic appliances were vacuum tube powered. Philco, Westinghouse, RCA, Zenith. And in 1950, a little Japanese company, not very well known, named Sony, put the new transistor technology into hearing aids. And then they thought, well, we could miniaturize other things. And in 1955, they came out with the first pocket portable transistor radio. And if you're old enough to remember those, you would have to remember they weren't very good. Tinny sound, it was just awful. But the innovation at play was portability. Teenagers could take those things to the beach and listen to rock music away from their parents. And in the past, they'd have to listen to the radio that was a piece of furniture in the living room. And then Sony made the first black and white TV in 1959 from transistors, and you know how this story turns out. Well, this is the journey of a disruptive innovation. It almost always first starts out as not very good. You have to remember, the first Toyota was not a Lexus. It was a Corona. It was a piece of tin with bad seats and a weak engine. But it got better. And that's what happens. It starts out as not so good. It usually appeals to people on the basis of higher convenience or affordability. Most of the people who bought that Sony black and white TV were people whose wallets or apartments were too small to buy the regular TV that was a big piece of furniture in the living room, which in today's dollars would have cost $4,000. And then this disruptive innovation gets better, begins to erode market share, and then becomes a dominant player. Now, this is what happens over and over and over in industry after industry. And about this time, somebody's thinking in the room, well, yeah, but K-12 is different. Sure it is. It's layered with politics. It has legislators and governors who see themselves, understandably, as a macro board of directors, writing the rules, setting the regulations, providing most of the resources. But that's not the problem in K-12, and that's not why it is vulnerable to massive disruption. The problem is that the business model is totally out of alignment with reality. Just totally out of alignment with reality. If you look at the business model, the operating assumptions of K-12, you see over in this column, one, knowledge must be scarce, hard to get to. So we must put a properly qualified adult in front of a certain ratio of kids and line them up in neat little rows and tell them the things they need to know and have them regurgitate back, confirming that they got it within a reasonable period of time. The truth is, the reality, knowledge is all over the place and the kids know how to get it. They learn, but mostly outside school. They are familiar with and comfortable on the technology platform. Another assumption that hangs on in the business model is all relevant knowledge is organized into courses, and those courses are mashed into the subjects, and they're mashed into courses, and the courses are put in proper sequence, the content of which is delivered by somebody we call an instructor to somebody we call a student through a phenomenon we call instruction, and confirmed by punching little bubbles on a test within a reasonable period of time. The kids out there learn in a completely integrated fashion. They even have a little term called mashup. I mean, they know how to take this and add it to that and mix in something else. They don't learn in these silos. They don't learn in this kind of a way. Further, we hold